Throughout the bulk of the US's involvement in World War II, its primary tank was the M4 Sherman, with many variants coming from it, including the standard M4A1 through the A4, up through the Jumbo, of which possessed increased armor over standard Shermans, though featuring the same firepower as regular Shermans. Though the majority of enemy German tanks were Panzer IVs or tank destroyers like the Stug 3, of which these Sherman could fight against on roughly equal terms, the heavier tanks, primarily the Panther, Tiger, various heavily armored tank destroyers, and especially the rare late war Tiger II, were an overmatch for the trustworthy Sherman. Though Germany had been producing the heavy Tiger tank since 1942, American efforts for producing a heavier tank than the Sherman were both slow and continuously undermined, as the US Army felt little need to produce a heavy tank, in part due to heavier tanks being more difficult to transport across an ocean and because of the belief that the Sherman was a sufficient tank for most, if not all, situations. As such, though various heavy and assault tanks were experimented with, notably the M6 and T14, only the up-armored M4A3E2 Jumbo, a variant of the already in production Sherman, saw somewhat large-scale frontline service. After several failures, the US Army decided to instead build upon the successful M4 Sherman, leading down a road of experimental successors, starting with the T-20 medium tank in mid-1943 and ending up with the M26 Pershing in late 1944. Only a meager 310 Pershings were sent to Europe prior to VE Day, with the first shipments arriving in January 1945, after the Battle of the Bulge showed that an increase in firepower and protection over that of the Sherman was necessary. Interestingly, though it was first designated as a heavy tank, the Pershing would later have its designation changed to that of a medium tank following World War II. This, however, only speaks for the standard M26, or at that point, what was known as the T26E4, a heavier version of the M26, colloquially known as the Super Pershing, would soon be making its way both into Europe and into the history books. The Super Pershing, otherwise known by the designation T26E4, was an M26 that saw an increase in shuttle velocity through having a different cannon installed over the standard 90mm M3 cannon used on production Pershings. This new cannon, the T15, though still 90mm, could penetrate substantially thicker armor, owing to its larger velocity, which came from both the cannon being longer and because of its larger ammunition. Importantly, several misconceptions about the Super Pershing exist, including the misdesignation as the T26E1-1, as well as the Super Pershing itself being a unique model. Though there are some levels of truth to both of these claims, they are not entirely accurate, as the Super Pershing that most people know about was a T26E4 that was converted from a T26E1, specifically the tank with the T26E1-1 designation, signifying that it was the first of the T26E1s to be built, being written on the side of the tank in some pictures. Further, the Super Pershing, being a T26E4, was one of 25 built, although this model in particular, being the up-armored tank that saw combat in Europe, was the only T26E4 with the T15E1 cannon, of which used single-piece ammunition, as opposed to the T15E2 that used two-piece ammunition, which all other T26E4s used, as well as the fact that the European Super Pershing is the only one that was equipped with the unique field modification armor that we see represented in pictures and in video games. In that regard, it was a one-of-a-kind version of a tank prototype that saw limited production. The T26E4 Super Pershing was designed to be a total upgrade in terms of firepower that could both counter and defeat the heaviest tanks that Germany could field in World War II, and possibly any foes in the near future. As such, it had to be equipped with a more powerful cannon. Because of this requirement, it used the T15E1 and E2 cannons, which could both penetrate a Panther's frontal upper glacis plate at a range of 2,600 yards, with the T15E1 being mounted on the single T26E4 that saw service in Europe. The later models of Super Pershing that used the T15E2 did so because the T15E1 had a very difficult time using the ammunition inside of its turret, as well as the fact that it had stowage problems for its ammunition, whereas the T15E2 used the two-piece ammunition that made it substantially easier to not only keep in the tank, but also to handle in the cramped turret. This said, both T15 cannon models were so powerful that they could completely penetrate a Jagdpanzer IV, going through the entirety of the vehicle, through the front and rear of the vehicle in one shot, before hitting the dirt behind it. The T15E2 that was installed on a majority of Super Pershings was discontinued following the war due to improvements in ammunition, namely in that the ammunition could be shorter and wider, making it easier to handle in the cramped turret. Another notable and extremely visible feature on the Super Pershings, the large springs on the top of the turret, were necessary in order to allow for its cannon to properly elevate. Due to the metal shrouding on the springs on the more well-known T26E4 Super Pershing that saw combat in Europe, many people do not know what they are, with some people even thinking that they might be a weapon or something else entirely. In early Super Pershings, however, you can clearly see the springs as they did not have the protective metal surrounding them at that point in development of the T26E series. In order of 1,000 of these T26 Super Pershings with the more powerful T15 cannon was placed, though only 25 were ever made, with only the most famous example ever seeing combat. This unique T26E4 Super Pershing was given to the US 3rd Armored Division once it arrived in Europe. Due to its rarity, the head of repair service for the 3rd Armored Division, Major Harrington, enlisted Lieutenant Belton Cooper to create field modifications with the intention of keeping the one-of-a-kind tank safe. With this in mind, 4 separate pieces of 38mm thick boilerplate were attached to the glacis at the front of the tank, with 2 being on the upper glacis and the other 2 being on the lower portion of the vehicle, these boilerplates being both highly angled and functioning as spaced armor. In addition to this, the front of the turret saw a massive increase in armor as well, with a portion of a destroyed Panther tank's 80mm thick frontal glacis plate being removed and modified for use on the turret mantlet of the T26E4. Finally, the famous elephant ears were also pieces taken from a disabled Panther tank and were added to the frontal sides of the turret, with all modifications including the armor itself, the counterweights added in order to balance the tank primarily in the rear of the turret, and anything else that was needed in order to ensure that these field modifications function properly, all increased the weight of the tank by a total of 5 tons. Though the Super Pershing is one of the very few examples of any prototype being field tested by the Americans in World War II, apparently not much mind was paid towards actually seeing it into combat, as it will only engage with the enemy twice, with the time between the initial arrival in Europe and actual combat being delayed numerous times, including when the special ammunition for the Super Pershing was sent to the wrong division. Additionally, the original sight that was meant for the more powerful T15 cannon had been removed from the tank prior to being shipped to Europe, leaving the 3rd Armored Division to take a sight meant for a standard M26 Pershing and working out the differences via trial and error at the range. These 2 mistakes, along with the field modifications, greatly delayed the actual combat usage of this vehicle. That said, again, it only saw combat on 2 occasions, once on April 4th, 1945, and the other time on April 21st, 1945, though a 3rd confrontation is speculated. Relating to the combat scene on April 4th, it destroyed an unidentified armored target. More interestingly, on April 21st, the Super Pershing was fighting in the city of Dessau when it destroyed a German tank. The gunner, J. Irwin, claimed that the destroyed vehicle was a Tiger II, though it is much more likely to have been a Panzer IV. It destroyed the tank in question with a shot to the lower frontal glacis plate of the hostile tank. This Tiger II claim has been the source of much debate over the years, although, per German records, no battalions with Tiger IIs in them were located anywhere near Dessau on or around that date, with reports showing that the closest King Tigers were around 70 miles away again on the date in question. In addition, with the Super Pershing being the rarest tank in the European theater of war, as well as the fact that the King Tiger was also one of the rarest tanks, with less than 500 examples in total being built, the likelihood of this engagement is incredibly small, especially considering that no pictures, footage, or official records exist of the supposed Super Pershing engagement with the King Tiger. With this last engagement marking the end of combat for the Super Pershing in World War II, it would soon be relegated to a tank dump awaiting scrapping rather than returning home to the United States. Pictures were taken before its ultimate demise at the hands of a scrapper rather than at the hands of an enemy German tank. Though it did have as successful of a combat trial as one might imagine, considering the logistical issues that it encountered, as well as the shortage of engagements with the enemy, only 25 of the T15 cannon-equipped Super Pershings were ever made, out of the original 1,000 that were planned. Though the T26E4 was never introduced officially into service, most of the improvements, including a different version of the improved 90mm cannon, made it into initial trials with a new variant of the Pershing, the M26E1, though only 2 were ever produced, with the type not seeing service due to cost issues, marking the end of considerations to have the Super Pershings mass-produced. Though the T26E4 was a promising venture, most examples of this vehicle ended up either being scrapped or used as range targets, with a sole example currently surviving on display at the 1st Division Tank Museum in Illinois. That said, thank you all so much for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you guys think about this video. Do you like the Super Pershing? Let me know if there's a specific vehicle that you would like me to do a history on. I like to go for more of the obscure vehicles, but of course, I will research pretty much anything so long as it's a good topic. But again, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all on the other side. Take care, everyone.